to Lead Generation Strategies for B2B Tech Companies, a podcast by Bright Vision.
So good to have you with us today, Adam. Welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, great to be here. It's going to be a fun chat.
Yes, so I'm so looking forward to have a discussion today about lead gen versus demand gen, which is a very interesting topic, and you're an expert in it and have worked a lot with it at GetAccept. But you have also done other stuff. So maybe before we dive into it, can you just give us a little bit of background, who you are and what are you doing?
Yeah, so I've been working in SaaS, especially for a while now, at a couple of different companies. Started more in the analytics part of marketing, I would say, and now have gradually moved into more demand gen, as we're going to talk about today. And it has really become a passion of mine. So I lead the demand generation efforts at GetAccept. GetAccept is a Malmö-based company in Sweden, for those of you who don't know, also scale up. So it's very high pace and very fun to try these kind of efforts. But I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. I usually create a lot of content around demand gen. I've created a community and a podcast around it as well. So it is a passion, both at work, I would say, but it has also become a passion outside of work, which I really feel is like the best of both worlds.
I love that. I love when you work with your interest and your passion.
Exactly.
And I can agree. So that is fantastic. And you have a lot of ideas and insights around demand gen and demand generation as a discipline. So maybe if there's somebody who haven't come across that term and mostly relate to maybe lead gen or prospecting or things like that, maybe you can define a little bit about what is demand gen and how do you see that?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's pretty easily, and I think we all come from that, to be honest. Like when we started trying to prove marketing as an organization, we started doing that by setting some kind of lead metric, or we can call it MQLs or whatever it is. But that was the main metric for the marketing department, and to increase that going forward. And I think that is what we usually call lead gen, trying to increase our MQLs, our leads, as much as possible through various tactics. And that probably worked quite well for some time, but we then, a lot of companies have seen that a lot of those MQLs or a lot of those leads coming in might not be the right ones. They might not be leading to revenue. So now the shift towards a more demand gen, as we call it, is more looking at revenue as more the Northern Star. So how can we drive the right leads that actually turn into revenue, more or less? So going from maybe more of a quantity thinking to more of a quality thinking. And that actually, I think most marketers recognize this, obsession with leads and obsession with MQLs. We all have worked at companies where we get people screaming at us when we don't hit the leads goals, and so on. And usually it doesn't really matter if it's not quality leads, so to say. So I think that's the big shift, going from quantity to quality.
That's interesting. And so the MQL is maybe dead now. Is that
maybe, or at least the definition of it. We still use MQL as a measurement at GetAccept for sure, but maybe more as an early indicator that something is working. And I think when I joined here at GetAccept almost 2 years ago now, and I think we were revenue centric in one way. We looked at how much revenue marketing was bringing in and so on, but we were still pretty heavy on trying to bring in high volumes of leads, because we thought that would bring more revenue, and sometimes it did and sometimes it didn't. So that was when we kind of started this work. So how can we transition our model a bit to be more revenue centric and prove marketing's position here? Often people talk about marketing as a cost center maybe, and we want to be more of a, we want to be a revenue driver, of course. And how can we then do that?
And what kind of implications did that get when you started doing that transition, where you came in? Have you seen a bigger involvement from the rest of the company, more budget from the CEO, or have you seen any results from it?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first immediate result is that we talk the same language as sales, right? If we also talk pipeline, if we also talk, deals, meetings booked, everything connects so much more, and it kind of aligns on its own. So if we look at this month and say, okay, we from marketing have generated this pipeline, that is actually something you can, grasp, and the sales can grasp that. Okay, how much of that are we then do we believe will close, as an example? That is for sure the immediate effect we saw from doing that. But I still think that the hard thing with this was like going from like a volume strategy as MQLs to maybe focusing more on quality. So how can we, the MQLs will go down, the leads will go down, but how can we prove that that is not bad for us? So that was kind of where I started. And I just want to be very practical here, because I think this is something one can do more or less. We have a regular marketing funnel where we look at MQLs, we have deals, which is meetings booked then, and we have maybe customer, if that is the 3 steps. We could even have visitor as an example. But what we decided to do was to split that funnel into a couple of different types. One type was what we called the high intent funnel. That was people who had actually asked for a demo or asked to talk to sales. And then we split it up into some of the rest that were more, someone wanted to try a free trial, those types of, someone wanted a white paper or whatever. And when we looked into those funnels, we saw such a huge difference. Like there was so much less volume coming into our high intent funnel, but so much of our ARR was coming from there. And vice versa in the other funnel, so much volume, so little came out. So we're paying so much to get these low intent MQLs coming in, but we're not getting anything out. So that was kind of the starting point, I think, for us. Oh, okay, this is maybe not an effective marketing strategy. Yeah.
And that's very interesting that you actually created a parallel funnel where you were very intentionally on what companies to target and so forth. I think we all agree on the problem where we have a lot of low level or low qualified MQLs, and it's really hard to move them down the funnel to SQLs. And I can many times see, working with clients, that it's actually other companies coming in at the SQL stage where sales or other activities might have driven them from more or less other activities than the MQL drivers. And I think there is a missync or miscommunication sometimes there where we actually just have them stuck in the funnel somewhere in the middle. So very interesting. So if I'm running a process like that, what's your recommendations? How should I go about? Should I just create a new funnel, or where did you start? What was your steps to success?
Yeah, we started with, it was basically a new year. So we started planning and looking at, okay, what do we need to do different this year? And we started with doing that, splitting into parallel funnels based on last year's data. So, okay. And then we immediately saw, okay, if we want to drive more ARR, obviously we need to drive more high intent buyers and try to really limit the amount of low intent buyers that we are actually now paying for. Well, we're maybe not paying for all of them, but at least for a big portion of it. So what we then after that tried to identify was, where currently are we driving most of our high intent users and where we're driving most of our low intent users. And one thing that we saw, and I think this is also true for many companies, is that we were really heavy on paid search, so Google Ads. And that can maybe work for a lot of companies, but it's also perhaps the easiest channels to lose money in as well. So we were really heavy in Google Ads and maybe not as heavy in more brand awareness channels. We did quite a lot of events, but not so much social, not so much that types of strategies. And that was something we saw quite quickly, that a lot of the low intent leads or the leads that weren't a fit for us was driven through paid search or similar. And then we completely evaluated that. And one of the clear changes that we did was we want to invest more in especially LinkedIn ads, because it's an expensive channel, but we can make sure that our ICP is targeted. We can make sure that the right people see us, and then limit a little bit what we do on Google Ads, because it's sometimes a tricky channel to get right. And often what you see, if I just deep dive into Google Ads a little bit, you often see that most of the ARR coming out is actually from people searching from your brand. And then it's like, okay, where did they hear about you in the first place? Yeah, it's probably some other channel or events or whatever. So that was one of the biggest changes we have done in the last 2 years, I would say, is to shift from a very search heavy strategy, trying to capture the demand that we thought was there, to maybe more of a social strategy where we really want to create our brand, make a name for ourselves. And that we have seen really good results from.
Fantastic. So interesting. And when you work with this and start building this and doing these changes, what main metrics have you looked into if you're, trying to look away from traffic and MQLs and rather try to find the quality? How did you go about?
No, I think we started with like high intent MQLs. That was our first Northern Star that we wanted to look at. Okay, and we usually set like a weekly goal. So weekly we want to drive this many high intent MQLs because they usually turn into this many meetings and this type of revenue. So that was the first thing we started obsessing over in the beginning. And I think that's also important. Like when you start something like this, maybe it's enough to choose 1 or 2 metrics that you focus on. And now we have kind of shifted to what you said now, like an SQO, as we call it. Like, okay, they have booked a meeting, and then we have also qualified it from a sales level. So it's that another quality aspect, so to say. It's actually a good opportunity for us. High intent MQL only says that they are interested in us, but then the next step, we are also interested in them. So that we have developed more recently, I would say. And then, of course, looking at the pipeline from that, and then the revenue. But the revenue is often, depends on how long of a sales cycle you have, of course, but it's often a more lagging metric in that way. But I really think the SQO part that we obsess a lot more on now, that is really interesting, because that gives a lot of qualitative feedback from sales also. Are we getting the right companies through the door?
That's great. And how do you define it, an high intent MQL?
That is, for us, that is someone who have 2 different sources. So either someone who have asked for a demo, like a demo of our product, or someone that have asked to be in contact with sales, like a contact form or talk to sales or so on. So they have actually said that they want to look on our solution and want to know more in that sense. And then we have other sources, of course, as well. We have a freemium version where they can actually use our product. That is more for us, the low intent side. It still happens, but it's not something that we focus on. Because we see it was the same thing when we did these funnels. We saw like the conversion rate from a high intent MQL into a meeting was almost 100% compared to the low intent one, where we have more the freemiums. That is more like the 10%. So it's such a big difference in how many MQLs we would then need to get an actual meeting.
Interesting. That's interesting because there's a lot of companies pushing the freemium model really hard and try to leverage that, but that's not what brought you your success, so to say.
No, so and I think that's, for some companies, that's probably very successful, especially if I think sometimes it's very needed to have a product that you can quickly understand, and that I think our product hasn't really been exactly that. It has demanded some kind of sales hand holding.
Yeah, that's great. And I suppose when you have those high intent MQLs, how do you move them to the next stage? Do you have an SDR team following up on them over phone or an email, or is it more a nurture flow, or how do you develop that?
Yeah, we have a pretty big SDR team here at GetAccept. I think we're around 10 people that usually follows up with a discovery call. Now we are actually evaluating, we are using a calendar tool as well called Chili Piper, where people can actually set their own time, and then they set their own time directly with our AEs, so to say. So we're testing both a little bit, but in general we use SDRs to make the initial discovery call, but then we're also testing this more, allowing people to actually set their own time with our AEs. more to evaluate if it's like, do we need this extra step because it gives us more quality metrics, or is it fine to actually have a meeting with them right away? So that is still a bit inconclusive, but we're looking forward to get some results from that.
Fantastic, interesting, and sounds very, very successful as you move along there.
Yeah.
And talking a little bit about the process there and the tech stack. Now you're representing a company, GetAccept, who actually could be a part of a sales tech stack. But how do you? So maybe you can just give us the tech stack a little bit for your demand gen efforts and so.
And I'm actually, usually I would say I'm not that heavy into tools. We use HubSpot as a CRM as an example, and I would say like HubSpot is our main marketing tool for really almost everything. And then we have Google Analytics, we have some other stuff as well, but HubSpot is really where we're trying to have that be our holy grail. So that is where we have the truth, or as much truth as we can get, but it's also where we do our marketing automation, where we have our website, where we have our push our ads from. So it's HubSpot is truly our big marketing tool, to be honest. And I think that's also a very demanding thing. I don't think you need that many tools to be successful in marketing. I think it's always good to prove something first, and then you might invest in some expensive tool for something. But I think it's sometimes very common to invest in something because you want to do something, and then it doesn't really work out. That is my feeling.
Interesting. Do you, for example, use intent data providers?
Yeah, we use. As an example, we use G2 intent data, especially in advertising on LinkedIn. We use that, so we make sure that we target people who have visited us on G2 as an example, because it's a big review platform for us and for other IT tech companies, of course, but not much else, to be honest. I know there are a lot of intent data out there, like people searching for this and that, but that is not something we have evaluated that much yet, to be honest. But yeah.
Wonderful. And so if a marketeer listening into this and would like to, maybe feeling that they're a little bit heavy on the Google Ads side and the top of the funnel, and would like to draw up a map of where doing this transition to a revenue-based marketing and demand gen strategy, where should they start, and what are the key stepping stones as you see it here?
Yeah, one key stepping stone, of course, is doing that, as I've said first, like do a pipeline differentiation, just to see that it is actually a difference in how people come in and what kind of leads coming in. But I think there are other ways also. It's very common for companies now to add some sort of free text field to your forms. So you ask people how they found you and so on, just to get that quality aspect, because that's usually an issue in marketing attribution. Like usually we see that we have a lot of inbound MQLs and deals coming from direct, they're coming from paid search, organic search maybe, but when we actually ask people say, okay, we heard about you from our network, or we saw you on LinkedIn, or I used to work with you before. So it's like a lot of channels that doesn't get picked up in the attribution software. So that was also a big learning for us when we added that. We saw that we have a huge word of mouth that cannot be attributed to paid search, but we also saw that we had a lot from LinkedIn as an example, which is hard to maybe directly attribute, because they might see 10 ads during a month's time, but then when they convert, it might be somewhere completely opposite. Maybe they Google for us, and then we have no idea. So I think that was a big realization, to actually ask people so how they actually heard about us, and maybe not what HubSpot said to us.
That's interesting. Yeah,
and wonderful. From that then take certain action that's needed. For us, that was example, we saw LinkedIn as a huge driver, we saw G2 as a huge driver as an example. So those have become two really key channels for us.
That's interesting. Those comparison services like G2 and Capterra and those, is that something you have quite high usage of them?
Yeah, for sure. Especially G2 for us have been very important. That's something we have, spent a lot of resources on, because we believe it's also maybe a better way sometimes to show credibility and trust instead of the regular, customer case. Sometimes it's easier just to let people write their own reviews, and that is perhaps more trustworthy sometimes. So yeah, it has been a big priority for us. Yeah.
So interesting. So just a question there around how to manage parallel funnels. I had an interview a few weeks ago with somebody who said that, the funnel is not really linear. It's more like a playground where prospects jump around and nobody follows the same path and so forth. And you have several paths here or funnels there. How do you keep track of everything? Do you have dashboards and measurements for all the different funnels, or what's the key things to keep in mind?
No, and I think that is very true. Like the buying journey, of course, is not linear, but I think to make sense of it, we need to make it a bit linear. And that is what I'm, try to do with that, is to at least let's understand the broad picture, and then we can kind of work from there. But yeah, so definitely have dashboards for those types of funnels. So one that is more the high intent one that, is more the low intent one, just to see the conversion rates between the stages, to be honest. But no, I would say like to have a clear overview of the customer journey is pretty impossible these days, especially as you grow as a company. You actually have quite a big machinery of inbound coming in. Then it's very tricky to make sense of it all. And that's why I think you need to find indicators and and then trust it. I think you're not going to be able to measure everything, but you can have some indications. And then I also am a huge believer in my gut feeling. So some indications from data, and then if it feels good, then let's try it. That is also my general feeling.
That's very interesting. So we're in the beginning of a new year, 2023. Where are you going to put most of your budget this year? Do you see any tactics, any trends, anything that will drive result in your funnels?
No, and this is a very special year, right? In the end of last year, we had a lot of changes in the macro environment, and now we want to be more cost efficient when we grow. So we really want to make sure we get return on investment on the dollars that we put out. So targeting will be a big thing for us. I think intent data, as you mentioned as well, like making sure that most of the people we target are right in that sense. Then maybe everyone won't be ready to buy, but we want to have certain parameters to know that it's the right companies, it's the right profile, and so on. So a lot of these kind of ABM, if you call it, initiatives, we will definitely do. Define certain accounts that these are really the ones we would like to target this year, and then perform a lot of different activities towards them. That will be our definitely big bet this year, because we are not going to spend as much as we have done in the past, because it's just not going to be efficient. We will still, in paid search, as I said before, we will still be there, but not invest as heavily. Social will continue to be a big thing for us. LinkedIn ads, we will try to stand out even more in the market, because I think more and more companies are going to revert to other tactics because they need to show short-term ROI. So I think it's a great opportunity to be on LinkedIn and to be on Facebook ads. So many different things, but I think targeting is the number one for us, like making sure that we target the right people. Even though it might be more expensive, we want to make sure that we get seen by the right people.
Interesting. And what's your content strategy going to be? There's a lot of different ideas around what will convert and what will not. Should it be gated? Should it be not? And so forth. How do you see content as a part of your funnel? Yeah, it's very much the base of our distribution channel, to be honest. And gated content, I think we stopped doing that right when I joined the company, just before, I think. So it was quite nice, actually. And from that, we have seen
a lot more people consume our content, which is good, and that is what we want. Before we had a lot of leads coming in from content as well, but as I said before, they didn't really turn into revenue either. So now I would say that content is very much the base of it. We have our own podcast that GetAccept as an example, and from that we also create a lot of content that we can then use on social. We can use it in emails. So we try to do things that work in several different channels. That is also the efficiency mindset now, right? Like we want to put our effort into things that actually scale on other things. So we're working a lot on our website now and things like that. Yeah, and I think that's a good tip also now when maybe the marketing economy is as it is, maybe to focus a bit on the base as well, making sure that your website is on par, like your conversion rates are as good as they could be, and those types of things.
That's great. And if you don't convert on the content and the events anymore, where do you see the most important conversion points, taking them from a visitor, a website visitor, or somebody interacting with your search results to actually sign up for a demo or do a hand raise, so to say? What tactics do you think 2023 will be the most important conversion points?
No, I still think that the most important conversion point is Google for us. But when people search for us, when people search for GetAccept, is by far our biggest conversion point. And then the question for us then becomes, okay, so how do we get them there? And that is what we need to figure out. And that is, of course, why we want to work a lot more with social, try and also understand what types of ads, what types of messaging are actually driving these demos. And we look at, as an example, we look at view conversion. So how many people have viewed this ad and then converted to a demo in another channel like Google, as an example, because that tells us that, okay, this ad obviously had an effect, but maybe they weren't ready to click and then demo, but later on. So that is something we're looking at a lot, trying to see how much social influence demos. That is a lot. Yeah, we believe in that a lot.
Fantastic. So interesting to hear all this and how well you have got this to work for GetAccept. And I know you, as you mentioned, you have your own podcast and you're active on LinkedIn. So for listeners who want to check out your content, Adam, where should we send them?
Yeah, I think the easiest is to always check me out on LinkedIn, Adam Holmgren. And then I also have a community and podcast called Driving Demand. But I think LinkedIn is always the easiest. I usually respond as quickly as possible.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm very impressed of everything you have got to work so well for GetAccept. So I'll look forward to see more from you and your content in the future. And thank you so much for taking time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Lead Generation Strategies for B2B tech companies. Don't forget to subscribe. You will find it where podcasts live. Discover how we can help you with your lead generation activities at brightvision.com.